Chapter 16 brought together everything you need as a salesperson to talk confidently about value, what it means, how it is created, how appraisers estimate it, how investors think about it, and how the entire process is regulated. This snapshot ties the pieces together so you can see the full picture as one continuous story rather than isolated topics. You began with the idea that real estate value is not just a price tag, but the present worth of future benefits. Those benefits include income, appreciation, the use and enjoyment of the property, and potential tax advantages. As an example, a small rental home might generate monthly rent, income, gain value over 10 years, appreciation, provide shelter and stability, use, and allow the owner to deduct expenses and depreciation, tax benefits. All of these together help determine what a buyer is willing to pay and what a seller is willing to accept. You then explored several types of value. Market value is the price a typical buyer would probably pay in a fair, arm's-length transaction. Investment value is what a particular investor thinks the property is worth based on their own goals and strategies. Assessed value is what the tax authority uses for property taxes. Value in use reflects what the property is worth to someone using it in a specific way, such as a business that depends on the location. You also saw other specialized values, such as insurance value, mortgage value, salvage value, book value, and reversionary value. Each type of value answers a slightly different question, which is why appraisers always clarify what kind of value they are estimating and for what purpose. Underlying all of this are economic principles that drive value in every market. Supply and demand explain why prices rise when buyers outnumber available properties and fall when inventory exceeds demand. The principle of contribution reminds you that the value added by a feature depends on what the market is willing to pay, not what it cost. A $15,000 bathroom may contribute more or less than that amount to value depending on the neighborhood and buyer expectations. Substitution says that buyers will not pay more for a property than for a similar alternative, which is the basis for the sales comparison approach. Highest and best use reminds you that a property is worth more when put to the most profitable, legally allowable, physically possible, and financially feasible use. Conformity, progression, and regression help explain why a small home surrounded by larger, higher-priced homes may gain value, progression, while an expensive home surrounded by lower-priced homes may be pulled down in value, regression. Assemblage and plottage show how combining parcels can create more value than the separate pieces, while subdivision shows the reverse. One large parcel divided into smaller lots may be worth more in total. From there, you moved into appraising market value itself. An appraisal is a professional opinion of value supported by data and analysis by a disinterested, licensed appraiser. The appraisal process follows a logical set of steps: defining the purpose and problem, gathering and analyzing data, identifying highest and best use, estimating land value, applying one or more of the three approaches to value, reconciling the results, and reporting the final value conclusion in a form that meets the client's needs. You also saw the difference between market value and market price. Market price is what a property actually sells for. Market value is what it should sell for under fair market conditions. When conditions are unusual, such as a distressed sale or a transaction between related parties, the price may not reflect true market value. You studied the three classic approaches to value in detail. The sales comparison approach is often the most intuitive for residential agents because it compares the subject property to recently sold, similar properties. The appraiser finds comparables that match the subject in location, size, age, and condition as closely as possible, and then adjusts the comparable's sale prices up or down for differences. If a comparable has a feature the subject lacks, the appraiser subtracts value from the comparable. If the subject has a feature the comparable lacks, the appraiser adds value to the comparable, After all adjustments, each comparable yields an indicated value for the subject. The appraiser then weighs these indications, giving more weight to comparables, needing fewer and smaller adjustments. You saw through an example how a comparable with only two small offsetting adjustments could be a stronger indicator of value than a property that needed many large adjustments. Alongside the appraiser's full sales comparison approach, you learned about the broker's comparative market analysis. A CMA uses similar logic, but is less formal and less comprehensive. It is prepared by a broker or salesperson to help a seller choose a listing price or help a buyer evaluate an offer range. Because the agent has a stake in the outcome, and because the CMA does not follow the same regulated standards as an appraisal, it is considered an opinion of value, not an appraisal. Nonetheless, your understanding of the sales comparison approach helps you prepare CMAs that are realistic and well supported. You then moved into the cost approach, which is especially useful for new or special purpose properties that have few comparable sales. The cost approach starts with the idea that buyers generally will not pay more for a property than the cost to acquire the land and build an equivalent structure. The appraiser estimates land value as if vacant, using a sales comparison of land sales. Then the appraiser estimates what it would cost to reproduce or replace the improvements. Reproduction cost is the cost to build an exact duplicate using the same materials and design, while replacement cost is the cost to build a modern equivalent with similar utility using current materials and methods. Once the cost of the improvements is known, the appraiser estimates accrued depreciation, the total loss in value from physical deterioration, functional obsolescence, and external or economic obsolescence. Physical deterioration is wear and tear, such as worn roofs or peeling paint. Functional obsolescence occurs when features are outdated or poorly designed, like a 4-bedroom home with only one bathroom. Economic obsolescence reflects changes outside the property, such as a nearby factory that makes the area less desirable. Some issues are curable if the cost of the fix is less than the resulting increase in value, while others are incurable if the fix costs more than the value it adds. The appraiser subtracts total accrued depreciation from the cost new to find the depreciated value of the improvements, then adds land value to produce a value indication by the cost approach. Next, you examined income-based methods, which are central for income-producing properties. The full income capitalization approach estimates value by turning net operating income into a value using a capitalization rate. You start with potential gross income, the rent at full occupancy plus other income. Subtract an allowance for vacancy and credit loss to arrive at effective gross income. Subtract operating expenses and reserves to find net operating income, and then divide NOI by an appropriate capitalization rate derived from comparable income properties. This approach reflects how investors think. They buy income streams, not just buildings, and they look at the relationship between income, risk, and price. You also explored simplified income tools, such as the gross rent multiplier and gross income multiplier. GRM compares price to gross monthly rent, while GIM compares price to gross annual income. These shortcuts are useful for quickly screening single-family rentals, duplexes, or small apartment properties. You saw through an example that a property with a lower price-to-rent ratio can recoup its cost faster and may therefore be the stronger investment, assuming similar expenses and risk. The 1% rule, monthly rent at or above 1% of purchase price, offered another quick test of whether a rental's income seems strong enough to justify its price. The chapter then tied the income concepts back to a detailed investor example. Tom's analysis of a rental house showed how income, expenses, vacancy, and capital reserves all work together to shape cash flow. When he set aside realistic amounts for insurance, taxes, expected vacancies, a roof replacement fund, and other capital needs, His monthly profit was far lower than the gross rent suggested. By applying his desired return rule, he was able to back into a maximum price he was willing to pay. This illustrated the same logic as the formal income approach, but from the investor's personal perspective. Finally, you studied how appraisal practice is regulated to protect buyers, sellers, lenders, and the public. You learned that the Financial Institutions Reform, Recovery, and Enforcement Act of 1989 created a national framework requiring appraisals in federally related transactions to be performed by state licensed or state certified appraisers. You saw that the Appraisal Foundation, through the Appraisal Standards Board and Appraiser Qualifications Board, sets the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice and minimum qualification criteria. States adopt these standards and may impose additional requirements. USPAP establishes ethical and performance standards that guide all professional appraisals. The competence requirement obligates appraisers to accept only assignments they are qualified to perform, or to disclose any lack of competency while taking steps to remedy it. The scope of work concept allows appraisers to perform assignments that are more limited, as long as the limitations are disclosed and the report is not misleading. USPAP also requires clear statements of any extraordinary assumptions and cautions that if those assumptions prove false, the value conclusion may be affected. You saw that appraisers must exercise due diligence in analyzing current market conditions, such as multiple offers, low inventory, changing price trends, and submarket variations between neighborhoods. You also learned that appraisers can specialize in different areas, including residential and commercial real property, personal property, mass appraisal for tax purposes, and business valuation. Professional associations and designations, such as those offered by the Appraisal Institute and other groups, provide additional training and recognition. As a licensee, you do not control the appraisal, but you can work constructively with appraisers. By preparing strong comparable data, highlighting legitimate features and upgrades, and correcting factual errors, you can help ensure appraisers see the most accurate picture of the property and the market. If a value seems low, you can request reconsideration through the lender, focusing on facts rather than pressure. Taken together, Chapter 16 showed you that market value is built on benefits, shaped by economic principles, estimated through 3 complementary approaches, and supported by a regulated professional appraisal system. Discussion. Question 1. How do the 3 approaches to value complement each other in practice rather than competing with each other? Answer. Each approach looks at value from a different angle. The sales comparison approach reflects what buyers have recently paid for similar properties. The cost approach reflects what it would cost to build the improvements new and account for depreciation. And the income approach reflects the property's ability to generate income and investor returns. In practice, appraisers use more than one approach whenever possible and reconcile the results. When all 3 point toward a similar range, confidence in the indication of value increases. When they differ, it prompts a closer look at assumptions and data. Question 2. Why is it important for agents to understand the difference between a CMA and an appraisal, even though both involve comparing properties? Answer. A CMA is an informal pricing tool prepared by a broker or salesperson primarily to help set listing prices or advise buyers. It is limited in scope and is not done by a disinterested third party. An appraisal is a formal opinion of value prepared by a licensed or certified appraiser following USPAP standards and often required by lenders. Understanding the difference helps agents set realistic expectations for clients, avoid overstating what a CMA represents, and communicate effectively with appraisers and lenders. Question 3. How does the principle of contribution help agents talk with sellers about improvements they are considering? Answer. Contribution focuses on how much an improvement adds to the property's market value, not how much it costs to install. With this principle in mind, an agent can help a seller evaluate whether a planned improvement is likely to pay off. For example, a modest kitchen update in line with neighborhood expectations may contribute more than it costs, while a high-end, highly customized remodel in a modest neighborhood may not be fully recognized in market value. This helps sellers make smarter decisions about where to invest before listing. Question 4. Why are USPAP's competence and disclosure requirements important for public trust in the appraisal process? Answer. These requirements help ensure that appraisers do not take on assignments they are unqualified to perform without informing the client and acquiring the necessary expertise. They also require appraisers to be transparent about any extraordinary assumptions or limitations that could affect the result. This transparency allows clients, lenders, and regulators to understand how the value opinion was formed, reduces the likelihood of misleading reports, and supports confidence in the overall system. Closing remarks. Chapter 16 gave you a complete framework for understanding market value. You now know that value is more than a price. It is rooted in benefits, shaped by market forces, and interpreted through structured methods. You have seen how the sales comparison, cost, and income approaches give you different lenses, and how investors and appraisers use those lenses in real decisions. You have also stepped behind the scenes into the regulated world of appraisal practice, where standards like USPAP and laws like FIRREA work to keep valuations credible and consistent. As you move forward in your real estate career, this chapter will serve as a foundation. When a seller asks why their neighbor's home sold for more, you can talk about comparables, contribution, and market conditions. When a buyer wonders why the appraisal came in lower than the contract price, you can explain appraisal methods and lender requirements. When an investor wants to know whether a duplex is a good buy, you can walk through income, expenses, and basic return rules. In every case, Chapter 16 gives you the language and logic to explain value clearly and confidently.